Chapter 132, Plans. Antony's POV. Antony was having such an odd day that Thaddeus's sudden request to take ownership of a sow didn't even strike him as strange. Yes, this might as well happen. I have a spare bedroom, Thad went on, hands flapping wildly as he made his case. It has to be a little crowded with 3 of you sharing your bed. I don't mind, Antony protested. Though that wasn't entirely true. The bed was cramped, especially given Hanyu's active sleeping style. If he worried he's inconveniencing me, I'll tell him otherwise if it's bothering him. Hanyu was staring at his feet, worryingly meek and unobtrusive. His tense shoulders and fidgety fingers showed his investment in the conversation, but with his head down, Antony couldn't see his expression to gauge what he wanted. He probably wanted a sow to stay with them. He was Hanyu's best friend, and he provided a buffer so the poor man wasn't trapped alone with Antony all the time. Considering the kiss debacle, would Hanyu even feel safe in their bed anymore without a sow there? Maybe he wants to have the bed to ourselves again, whispered a traitorous, hopeful part of Antony's mind. Maybe he was telling the truth and he really does want to kiss, want me. Antony crushed the thought down immediately. Hanyu was a shit actor and a worse liar. Anyone could have seen that he was forcing the words. After the disaster of a kiss, he probably didn't want Antony anywhere near him, especially in bed. And a sow will need constant protection now, Thad went on, breaking him from his morose thoughts. Well, of course Julia didn't have any choice, but things will be dangerous going forward. There's 3 of us to look after him. And Cloelia is wonderful at teaching self-defense, so she could give him quite a sting of his own. It was a good point. Antony recalled the intoxicating new edge on a sow's scent and shuddered. Even if the man stayed with him, he would definitely need some combat training, and quickly. It wouldn't hurt for Hanyu to learn some self-defense basics either, come to that. But the priority would be a sow. If anybody tasted him... He was still deeply shaken by the idea of what Julia had done. Vampire blood, cursed elf blood, rather, in a human... just like Sana. We sat in the closet. I wanted a confined space so I could subdue them if they tried to tear out of the room in search of prey, and then afterwards I shut up the closet and didn't use it anymore. I started sending the offerings there. I don't think I set foot in the place until I moved Hanyu out. It was so much smaller than I remembered. They grinned over at me. Come on, Antony. Don't tell me you're scared to have me drink your blood. If I can handle it every day, you can manage it this once. I don't drink from you every day, I growled at them, so they wouldn't hear the fear in my voice. They were right, of course. I was scared stiff. They gave me that superior, knowing look that used to piss me off so badly. They made the face so often that their skin was beginning to wrinkle along the lines of the expression. Those wrinkles scared me worse than anything. Come on, they said again. You're making me embarrassed for worshipping you my whole life. I might have to find a religion with tougher gods. Oh, shut up, I snapped. They giggled, that gentle giggle. Everything about them was sharp lines, but that giggle was soft and sweet as a fresh spring. Oh, lovely man, they chided. I never knew how to react when they called me that. Come here, it'll be all right. It wasn't. Antony tensed at the memory, which was a mistake given the state of his body. The shock of pain brought him back to the present, and for once he resurfaced gratefully. There was no point thinking about all that. He needed to think about his current responsibilities. He needed to think about a sow. A sow will need protection. He'll need protection from people like me. Can I even be trusted with him anymore? But how could he bear to separate a sow and Hanyu again? Why should Hanyu be punished for Antony's lack of trustworthiness and control? It was all such a mess. Thad's hands flapped faster. It's not just practicality. Julia, Cloelia, and I are all... We're very fond of him. We'd like to have him around." Was this another of Thaddeus's schemes to coddle Antony? He'd just been going on about how he wanted to help, and now he was offering to take custody of a man who was suddenly going to present multiple complications. "I can't ask you to do that," though perhaps he should. "A thou is my responsibility." "Taking him on wouldn't be a responsibility." Thad had resumed his nervous pacing. "It would be a joy, if that's what he wanted, of course." Hanyu folded to his knees with a loud thunk that made Antony flinch, his own knees aching in sympathy pain. Or maybe it was actual pain. His knees had taken quite a beating on the beach, come to think of it. May your servant speak, my lords?" the young man asked. Antony exchanged a startled glance with Thad, who looked as guilty as he felt. Did Thaddeus think this sudden formality was his fault? Antony's own guilt increased. Thad hadn't done anything wrong, and shouldn't have been made to feel as though he had. It was all Antony's doing. "Oh dear," Thaddeus whispered. Antony's response was louder. "For goodness sake, of course you can," he snapped, flinching at the unintended sharpness of his tone. "Say whatever you like." I think Esau does want to live with Lord Thaddeus," whispered Hanyu. "He won't say as much, but he does." The young man's voice trembled with emotion. Was he near tears? Probably. It was Hanyu, after all. This was no ordinary bout of weeping, though. This was Hanyu making a terrible sacrifice, risking his chances of continuing to live with the friend he loved so much out of respect for Esau's wishes. Antony had never managed to be so selfless, only half-heartedly attempting to direct Hanyu towards better masters. Of course he would put Esau's needs first, Antony thought, his own throat closing up dangerously as he looked at the humbly bent head, the tumble of golden hair. He loved so purely and selflessly. He would never have let something like this mess with Marcus happen. "Please don't be angry with him, my lord," Hanyu begged, turning his desperate, and yes, tear-stained, face up to Antony in appeal. "He's so grateful to be yours, and it's amazing that you're keeping him. I'm sure he'll be so happy and good no matter what you choose to do with him. It's fine," Antony interrupted. He was too tired and sore to be made especially nervous, but the young man's fear still sent his heart sinking right down to his toes. "I'm not offended. I never thought he was especially thrilled by our arrangement. It makes sense that he wants to live with Thad." "Really?" Thaddeus gaped at them, his sweet round face shocked and just beginning to teeter between hope and skepticism. "Why do you think that?" "It's hard to describe it exactly," cried Hanyu. "It's just the way he talks and looks and what he doesn't say. I've known him all our lives, and I might not be able to read him as well as I used to, but I can still tell some things." Thad's eyes widened. "I didn't mean to doubt you or suggest you were lying. Of course not. I'm just surprised." There was no reason for him to be surprised. Antony certainly wasn't. Thaddeus was gentle and generous. He'd saved Esau's life that day on the deck, even if neither of them realized it. And living with him would mean constant contact with Julia, who had explained herself to Esau with such passionate intensity and given him her own blood. Even loud, tactless Cloelia had dedicated herself to watching the door and protecting him while he convalesced. Anyone would be lucky to live with them. Esau had to know it by now. Hell, Antony had even set up the fish lessons in the first place because he was hoping that Hanyu might. The idea was worth exploring, especially now that Antony had fucked everything up so royally. "Wouldn't you be sad to see him go?" he asked cautiously, testing the waters. Hanyu ducked his head. Yes, my lord, but that hardly matters." "I don't even matter!" Would Antony ever be able to stop hearing those words echoing through his head, the desperate sincerity with which his precious man had thrown them out? What had Marcus done to him on that island? What had he said to make Hanyu believe such an absurd thing? It was so obvious that Hanyu mattered immensely. He was so sweet and generous and funny and totally irreplaceably himself. How could anyone have managed to convince him otherwise? Unless it wasn't Marcus at all. Antony had never once treated Hanyu like he mattered. He scared him, snapped at him, kissed him without so much as a by your leave, and sapped his literal lifeblood. Why wouldn't the poor man's sense of self begin to crumble after a few months of such treatment? Thaddeus's voice interrupted his horrified realization. We could just ask Asao himself, the other vampire suggested, not even managing to sound as if he had any faith in this solution. Please, my lords, that would upset him so much, Hanyu cried. He just wants to be good. He'll be very happy no matter which of you he serves. Right, sure. Antony had clearly made the man deliriously happy during their time together, what with his shaking and weeping and begging to be beaten for his master's entertainment. I trust your judgment, Hanyu. Antony hoped he wasn't too obvious about the way he was toadying up to the young man. If you say he wants to be with Thaddeus, I believe you. And of course I won't stand in the way. Anyhow, Thad, remember I offered you a boon when you helped him on the deck? I said I'd give you anything you wanted, and here you are, actually wanting something for a change. He's yours. The smaller vampire's hands flapped even harder, and Antony began to worry that he would shake a finger loose. Oh dear, I know that's what I asked for. Thank you, Antony. It doesn't seem right to talk about him like this. Giving him like he's a tank or a book. Oh dear. This was why Thaddeus was so right for Hanyu. And Asao, of course. He noticed these things, thought about them. He was so thoughtful. Antony would never be as sweet and good as this man. Hanyu's brow had pinched with thought as well. Perhaps... I know it isn't my place. Asao is the property of the gods. So am I, and we're so honored to be yours, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. His voice rose in panic as he went on, and by the end of this speech he was practically squeaking, bent over his knees on the carpet. Antony stared down helplessly, head spinning. I don't think you did say anything, he observed. Come on, out with it. No one here will be angry with you, you know that. Please, please believe that. Hanyu lifted his face, but his shoulders stayed tense and tightly drawn. It's just... Asao longed to be yours, my lord. My lord Antony, I mean. The groveling was exhausting. Antony knew he didn't deserve it, but he yearned for just a moment with Hanyu as he used to be, comfortable to the point of brashness and so sweetly, effortlessly informal. Just use our names, Antony snapped. It'll be so much less confusing. All right, Hanyu agreed, flinching and making Antony wish he hadn't said anything. Anyhow, he did. He talked about it all the time, but then the way things happened, he was upset when he felt like Marcus got rid of him. I don't think he enjoyed being yours as much as he thought he would, because he didn't like the feeling of being given away. I don't mean any disrespect. He was still so honored and grateful and... Yes, all right, Antony interrupted. So he wants to be Thad, but he doesn't like being given away. How are we supposed to reconcile those things? Do you want Thad to steal him? Thaddeus squawked, offended. Antony? I don't know, Hanyu said miserably. I just thought of it when you were mentioning giving him, that's all. They all sat in silence for a moment. Antony's weary, pain-drunk mind was of no help in deciding what to say next, or whether to speak at all, so he lapsed into an unhappy stupor until Hanyu spoke up again. Maybe, the young man said tentatively. You said you offered Thad a boon, my lord? Antony? Antony was hardly going to fuss at him about names again after the way his attendant had cringed. Still, he couldn't help noticing how easily Thaddeus's name, not even his full name, but an affectionate diminutive, flowed from Hanyu's mouth. It made quite a contrast with the way the young man struggled to say Antony's own name. There can't be any question about it. He would be so much happier with Thad.
Yes, I told him I'd give him anything he wanted, he said briskly, trying to keep his focus on the conversation at hand. Do you think that would make the idea easier for Thou, being a reward instead of just a gift?
Maybe if it were in public? Hanyu darted a desperate glance at Thaddeus. He'll be so glad to be yours no matter what, but maybe if he knew that our friends had heard that he was specifically requested, all this shuffling of masters would be less humiliating?
Since they had stopped spending time at the Taishan court, Antony rarely got to indulge his taste for pageantry and setting a scene. His mind began whirring over the possibilities now, suddenly awake despite his exhaustion. We could all go up on the deck some night, and then if you approach Thad and invoke the boon and requested a thou as your reward, I could be reluctant, grumble about it, but capitulate in order to keep my word. He snorted. Theo would recommend that we duel for his hand like in one of her sob stories. Hanyu gasped.
That would be so romantic!
He sounded like his usual self, excited and unself-conscious. The formality and priest talk were stripped away just for a moment, and Antony wanted to fling himself into the moment and live there. He wanted to build a fucking house and settle down in the sound of Hanyu's voice. That made no sense. Antony was being deranged, and he clearly needed to go to bed.
Oh dear, Thaddeus fretted. I'd lose a duel for sure. We could make it something you'd win, cried Hanyu. A fish-catching contest or paper folding or something. If it was too obviously rigged, we'd just humiliate a sow, Thad argued. It would have to be subtle. They went on chattering happily to each other, raising and rejecting one scheme after another. Antony leaned back on the sofa, so caught up in the pleasure of listening to Hanyu's cheerful, normal voice that he didn't even realize he was going to fall asleep. When he startled awake, Thad was gone and Hanyu was kneeling quietly at his feet. Well, for a certain value of quietly, the young man was fidgeting and looked exhausted.
Fit! Sorry! Antony gasped. Where's Thad? Hanyu jumped a little at the sound of his voice, darting a glance up at him. He left, my lord. My lord again. Have you been waiting long? I don't know, the young man said helplessly. Antony swallowed down his impulse to ask why the fuck Hanyu hadn't gone to bed or at least headed off to do something other than kneeling on the floor. Neither of those questions seemed likely to lead to a productive conversation. Did you two settle on a plan? He asked instead. Hanyu shook his head. Nothing concrete, my lord. We have a few ideas, though. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. Thank you for doing all this for Asao. He'd be so honored if he knew all the trouble you were going to out of consideration for his feelings. Oh, come now, Antony grumbled. I fell asleep. You and Thad were doing all the work, and you seemed to be having fun together. Antony tried to keep his voice nonchalant and free of jealousy. It wasn't Thad's fault that he was sweet and patient and much easier to have fun with than Antony could ever hope to be. Hanyu didn't seem to pick up on his tension. It was fun. Whatever you and Lord Thaddeus decide on, I'm sure it'll make Asao happy. And what about you? Antony couldn't help asking. Are you Thor? You're all right with this, Hanyu? You're so kind to consider me, Hanyu whispered, staring at the floor. I'll be fine, my lord. I couldn't stand in the way. Asao's been through so much. So have you, Antony couldn't help pointing out. The young man flinched, and Antony cursed himself. Stupid! Why bring up all that fear and misery? Of course Hanyu didn't want to talk about it right now. Are you ready to go to bed? he asked at last, half pleading. I'll give you a hand up if you return the favor. He was disappointed when his attendant scrambled to his feet alone, ignoring Antony's outstretched hand. The disappointment eased when Hanyu looked down at him, hands on his hips, and spoke in an almost normal voice. You can't pull me up! Your sternum and collarbone are still broken! They're getting better, Antony grumbled, basking in the scolding. They won't if you try to lift things, Hanyu argued. He wouldn't pull Antony up by his hand either, instead wrapping his arms around Antony's middle and guiding him carefully to his feet. It was the most physical contact they'd had all day, and Antony leaned into it, savoring the warmth of Hanyu's arms, the firmness of his chest, the care in his touches. He wasn't the only one who seemed moved by their proximity. Hanyu's heartbeat sped up as he pulled Antony close, and for a wild moment, Antony let himself hope again. I could ask, he thought desperately. I could just say, Hanyu, please tell me the truth. Did you want the kiss or not? Do you want to be together? He couldn't even pose the question in the privacy of his own head without stammering. He was sure to fumble it all if he actually opened his mouth. But he could still ask, couldn't he? What harm would it do just to ask? He could ask, and Hanyu would prostrate himself and murmur about what an honor it would be to serve his master in any way Antony chose. He'd hide his face so Antony couldn't see his fear, but it would be there. It was probably there already. After all, there was more than one reason for someone's heart to begin pounding. Antony kept silent as they both performed their bedtime ablutions and slid under the blankets. Despite everything, he couldn't help hoping that Hanyu would cuddle up to him the way he used to once they were in bed. He did not. He settled on the other side of the mattress and murmured, "Good night, my lord," making Antony feel as though he'd been exiled to the other side of a continent. But Hanyu had come to bed without Antony's prompting. At least he felt safe enough to do that. I'll give him the choice to move in with Thad tomorrow. It would hurt. Gods, Antony couldn't even speculate how much it would hurt. He didn't know how he would face the coming weeks, the coming decisions about Marcus and Titus without Hanyu's presence. But he'll be happy. He'll be with Asao, and he'll have a master whose name he can say. Thad will be good to him. Antony tried to take comfort in the thought as he drifted off to an uneasy sleep.